Who doesn't love Eddie Murphy? From comedies like Trading Places, Coming to America, and Beverly Hills Cop, to voice acting roles in films like Shrek and Mulan, he has had a long and fruitful career. The actor was also nominated for Best Supporting Actor for a role of his in Dreamgirls. And given the fact that he has such amazing timing, it should come as no surprise to anybody that Eddie Murphy got his start as a stand-up comedian. Even though he was born in Brooklyn, his family actually came from a different part of the country, the South, and that's actually what we're going to be talking about today, trying to trace the Murphy family line. You may be wondering why it looks like I'm recording from a prison cell today, and that is because, unfortunately, I am quarantining after having tested positive for, the thing that everybody, that thing. But we're not going to let something like that get in the way of having a grand old time tracing the ancestry of one of our favorite actors. I'm Yona Paley, and I believe genealogy is fun. Today, we are going all the way to North Carolina to trace the paternal ancestry of Edward Regan Murphy. He was born 1961 in Brooklyn, New York to Charles Edward Murphy and Lillian Laney. Now, Charles was a transit police officer who tragically died at the age of 28 after being murdered. Now, details of his murder are rather murky, but it does seem like this was some sort of a crime of passion. So he and Lillian had separated some years before, and it may have been a romantic partner that had killed him, but unfortunately, Eddie Murphy's dad was killed when he was very, very young. Charles was the youngest of 6 siblings, all children of Henry Roosevelt Murphy and Rosa Boykins. Now, Henry had moved from North Carolina to New York around 1930. He was an auto mechanic as part of the Works Progress Administration, a New Deal program that employed a lot of people throughout the 1930s and 1940s. According to his World War II draft card, the town that Henry came from was called Curry in Pender County, North Carolina. And by finding his marriage certificate to Rose, we can actually see that his parents were named Patrick Murphy and Mariah Jackson. If we go back to the 1910 U.S. federal census, we actually find Henry and his parents living there along with a bunch of siblings, and Patrick's occupation is listed as that of a farmer. I had a lot of luck, especially with marriage certificates from this region. So I was also able to find Patrick's marriage certificate, and that gives us even another generation back to his parents Albert Murphy and Margaret Bannerman. Now, the last name Bannerman, this actually didn't come about through this certificate. It came about through another document that I'm going to mention at the end of this video. But for now, just know that his parents were Albert and Margaret. They show up in the 1880 U.S. federal census living in Columbia Township in Pender County, very, very near to Curry. And we can see that Albert was a laborer. Given the fact that he was born around 1840, this means he was most likely born into slavery. And this ended up absolutely being the case. And I thought that since the last name was Murphy, well, I could look around for other people named Murphy and maybe try to find slaveholders who were named Murphy. But unfortunately, it turned out to be much more difficult than I anticipated, because when I looked through the 1870 and 1880 census for this region, there were a ton of people with the last name Murphy. And I don't quite know that they're all related to each other. In fact, there were just pages and pages of Murphys. There were also 2 other last names associated with his wife, so Margaret Bannerman. So there were a lot of Bannermans, and Margaret's mother had the last name Alderman. So there were a ton of Murphys, Aldermans, and Bannermans, but they didn't seem to be related to each other. They seemed to all be living near each other, which makes me think there were probably some common slave owners who they had lived with, but there was just nothing that really sprung to mind and made it obvious as to who the slaveholder might have been or what their relationship with all these other people were. And in fact, Albert does not seem to show up in the 1870 census. I looked both in Pender County, which actually Pender County was not formed until 1875. It used to be part of New Hanover County. So I looked through the New Hanover County records and still nada. But I guess that for now, this is about as far back as we can get on the direct Murphy line. Albert's death certificate says that he was 102 years old, which is a little bit dubious. I mean, given the age in the census, he was probably around 88 years old when he died. Still very, very old, but not exactly 102. So it's always fun seeing these old death certificates where people get the date of birth off by, decades. So yeah, we do have his death certificate. Unfortunately, it does not list his parents' names. So that was kind of my last hope with regards to available vital records. But there is actually one more kind of cool document that I was able to find, and it's just an index. But what it is a listing of slave cohabitation records. People who were enslaved were not allowed to get married, but they did have other types of ceremonies as well as kind of quasi type of weddings, and many of these were documented, as we can see here that Albert and Margaret in 1860, they have a record of cohabitation. So we know that their first child was born around 1860, so it also makes complete sense in the timeline that this is when they got married. And I was really, really sad to find out that the actual document doesn't seem to be online anywhere. I couldn't even find any reference to where it actually might be. My guess is probably at some sort of courthouse, but the index is online. And, to find a record from 1860 of two enslaved people getting married is kind of cool because, finding records from before 1870 can often be very challenging. But in this case, we have an 1860 record of Albert and Margaret being together. So there you go. Eddie Murphy's great-great-grandfather was Albert Murphy, born into slavery around 1840 in North Carolina. And there are still a lot of mysteries surrounding who his ancestors might have been and who he was enslaved by and other things like that. But it's still a very fascinating look into one of the greatest actors, Eddie Murphy. If you like this episode, make sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the YouTube channel. As always, I'm looking forward to bringing you more videos as well as tips and tricks that you can use in your own genealogy research. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.